I wanted to talk about something that I usually don't get a chance to talk about as much, which is our living wage program. It's a certification program. And so just by show of hands, whether it's your physical hand in the screen or your little Zoom hand, who knows or has heard about the living wage certification program who's on the call? So we actually have quite a few people who are aware. Okay, awesome. So our program is really an outlet for our policy work, right? So much of our economic justice work is around ensuring that people can have the lives that they deserve to have. And that includes providing for their families and having the benefits that they need to be able to do so. And so Living Wage is really a program that is born out of that same principle and philosophy that we absolutely need public policy changes and shifts. And there are people who are willing to shift as individuals, whether it's an organization, a company, et cetera, in the meantime, so that we're making sure that as many things are changing at once as possible. And so I always like to make that distinction because it's important to recognize we don't think the living wage program should replace policy work. We are still and forever going to continue to work on economic justice policies, but the living wage program is here to kind of lift the wage floor for all sectors, even and regardless if we have minimum wage raises again soon or not. Any questions about that part of the living wage program, about the purpose that it serves? Awesome. So the event that we want to host is to essentially add more certified employers to our living wage program. We have about 150 employers across the Commonwealth who are certified, and that has been since 2018. But we really want to get that number up for lots of reasons, right? One, for the fact that once you have that certification and people are aware of it in your sector, they are also going to want to be a part of it. They're going to want, folks want to do what's cool, right? But the other part is that there is some evidence to show that when there is a little bit more of what one could say peer pressure, that it actually starts to raise the wage floor in sectors that are usually a little more visibilized. And so that is one of our biggest intentions. So we've got some positive peer pressure. Yes, thank you, Sheila. We've got some canvassing days that are coming up. They're in the summer, one in June and one in July. And our 4 localities where we have local steering committees, that's Richmond, Charlottesville, Harrisonburg, and Alexandria or Northern Virginia. We are going to be having those steering committee members kind of steer folks into a canvassing event. I also spoke with Brian Johns, who is the head of Virginia Organizing, if you've ever heard of them or worked with them. They also work across the state, and they really want to participate as well. And so they're going to get their organizers and their folks out to be a part of the Canvas Days. And essentially all we're going to do is we're going to meet together. We're going to make sure that everyone has promotional materials. Some of those promotional materials will include a QR code in case you need to just drop something at a restaurant that's busy, et cetera. You know, we don't want to hold folks up. We want to make sure that they're receiving the information. Some of those materials will have a lot more detailed information about what the program is. It really just depends. And we're going to have folks go out, prep themselves first, right? Go out and canvass, whether it's in their neighborhood or whether it is a part of their city or county that the steering committee members have mentioned would be a really good area to cover. And we're just going to start to build networks and relationships with employers, let them know about the program, make sure they have some leave behind materials, answer some frequently asked questions, and then make sure that the information about who you visited gets back to myself so that we can follow up. And it's just going to be a really fun, like, canvas day. If you've ever done canvassing for a political campaign, it's going to be really similar to that, except we're not going to be knocking on folks' home doors. We're going to be going into places of employment. Yeah, so I'll open that up for any questions folks might have. Go for it, Jean.
Well, I was wondering if you had a press release that we could send to a newspaper, local newspaper. I live in an area that's not named, but I would be happy to submit something so that people start hearing about it.
So we do have an opportunity for the localities who aren't named. So it's a two-part question there, and I want to answer for Eugene. We are going to have sort of a digital download kit for people who are outside of those 4 certifying areas, because we actually have a statewide certification. It's one number, it's a really high number, and one of the highest that would be necessary across the state. And people who are outside of our certifying areas, I know there's some folks here who are in the Tidewater area, can still participate, but it would just be asking folks to apply underneath that statewide certification rather than having a local body do that. So there is that opportunity. And I also do think it is a good idea for us to have a press release. And so I will definitely consider that closer to the day. The first event is June 25th, so we've still got some time. And the second event is July 30th. Thank you for those questions, Jane.
Do you mind if I jump in or ask a question? So my understanding is that for the living wage leadership teams that already exist, they'll be coordinating an event, and so you might have like bagels in the morning and meet up and discuss afterwards. If you are not in one of those localities, I would invite you to still put together an event. So, you know, if the Coastal Virginia Unitarian Universalists and the Peninsula Unitarian Fellowship of UUs wanted to collaborate and grab a couple other folks from the Hampton Roads region, and somebody hosts the bagels beforehand and somebody hosts lunch afterwards, or y'all go to a restaurant afterwards, I think that this is a good opportunity for both community building and for getting more folks certified.
Yeah, and I will say also too that, especially speaking of the Tidewater Hampton Roads area, we have had interest from funders, we have had interest from community members and organizations to have a local living wage steering committee there. We just have never been able to set one up. So this might be a good introduction. Interested in what exactly the program is. Yeah, Sheila, could you mute yourself? Sorry. Thank you. And what exactly the program is, so that we might be able to grow local steering committees in these areas. No pressure, of course, right? But that is also an option.
I'm sorry, it's Roseanne. It's a quick question. What I'm seeing on the website, just quickly checking, is that the certification really involves just pay rates. So is that correct? So if you pay all employees $12.50 and above an hour in Richmond, you get the basic certification. And if it's $16 an hour above in Richmond, that's the gold certification, and that's it.
Yes, and so that is a frequently asked question, Roseanne, is like, what all is involved? Do we have to have healthcare benefits, et cetera? Now, one thing I do like to point out is living wages are not static. Every year we revisit our numbers because living wages are inclusive of housing costs, childcare costs, transportation, et cetera. And as we all know, those things shift. And so each year we sort of visit the MIT living wage calculator. We use some other aspects as well, fair market rent, et cetera, to create our numbers. But I do like to just let employers know that, because upfront, you know, maybe it's $12.50 this year, but next year we're going to have to probably revisit and have another conversation about where we're at. And so I think in the future, what I am hoping for is that we just have the gold standard. We really included those other levels when we did not have a minimum wage raise in Virginia. And so going from $7.25 to $12.50 was a huge leap, but now going from $11 to $12.50 is not much of a gap. So, you know, that's just thinking future forward. And sorry, Roseanne, that's off base for your question, but the technical answer is yes, it is just related to the wage rate that you pay your employees. And there's quite a few little definitions on the application page that folks can check to ensure that they're not committing any wage theft. We do find a lot of employers might pay all of their full-time employees a living wage, but then they have a lot of contracted employees that they shouldn't have on contract, that should be on salary. And so we discover that through the application and we talk with them about that, et cetera. And so it's another aspect of it, but thank you, Roseanne.
I know there's background noise again, apologies, but Jace, do we have details of like the schedule for the day at this point or not quite yet? Okay.
Yes, sorry. So we do in everywhere except Alexandria. I'll just need to double check with them about their schedule. But generally right now it's about 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock window. You can come as early as you need to or as late as you need to. You can join for as long or as little. For those localities that are going to be physically present, we're going to have promotional materials already printed out for folks. And so that's one of the reasons to go and visit at the meeting place, make sure you have those to take them with you. But generally people are going to do about 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And I think everyone has a location that is secured except for Alexandria again. So I'll just check with them.
I have a question, Chase. So I'm in Northern Virginia, so there is, I guess, somebody coordinating it. How will I know? Do I need to check the website or how will I know the details?
Very good question. So we actually have a registration page that Sheila helped me make. So thank you, Sheila. But yes, if you can register your interest, at this point, we're not saying to everyone that just because you register, you have to join. It might be that something changes. But if you can register your interest, when we secure all of the information around where to meet and what time and etc., then we'll actually send you a follow-up email that includes all of that information and make sure that you receive that. Thank you for that question, Nancy.
And I will put that registration page in the chat right now.
I'm also going to just include our living wage website, although we are still going through a couple of changes on it in case anyone wants to read up and just make sure that they understand the purpose, the intention, whether this is something they care about and want to join. All that information should be there. Any other questions about the Canvas Day or anything, frankly, to do with living wage? Yeah, go for it, Jean.
How receptive are civic organizations like Rotary, local organizations to such presentations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And frankly, what I have found is that it very much depends on who is a part of that civic organization. So we have had some really good relationships with folks in Harrisonburg, for instance, the Rotary Club, also the United Way, who's invited our local steering committee to do, reports and things of that nature on a pretty frequent basis. But that's not necessarily the case throughout the state. And so I think some of that is about relationships, some of that is about politics, as much as we do try to inform folks that this is not a public policy, it is a voluntary program. Because of who Virginia Interfaith is, some people just automatically assume that this is like a left-leaning scenario. And so it really depends from my experience, Jean.
It looks like there aren't any other questions. So thank you all for coming and we look forward to you participating in our Living Wage Canvas Days.